Study section 8. England, France, and Holland, and expansion. Introduction. Having been impressed by the achievements of the Portuguese and the Spaniards in their overseas expansion, England, France, and Holland felt they should also participate in the struggle for overseas possessions and the riches. Interestingly, this study section shall be discussing extensively on the three basic factors that impelled these countries, England, France, and Holland, to engage in overseas expansion. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to examine the involvement and achievements of English explorers to the quest for European overseas adventures between the 15th and the 17th centuries. Assess the reasons that propelled France and Holland into overseas exploration. Terminology. Negroes, a member of a dark-skinned group of peoples originally native to African south of the Sahara. Adventure, an unusual and exciting or daring experience. English expedition in their quest for overseas expansion. John Cabot was an Italian navigator and explorer whose 1497 discovery of parts of North America under the commission of Henry V of England. Starting from 1480, expeditions has been set out from England to find the island of Brazil, thought to be situated in the Atlantic west of Ireland. But a more ambitious phase began in England's overseas expansion in 1496, and the man who gave the lead in this respect was John Cabot. His primary objective was to reach Sagu, Cartel, China, and hence the Spice Islands. Cabot was born in 1450 in Genoa, Italy, early in life. He had sailed and traveled in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea area. He had acquired some wealth from the spice trade of the Near East and was convinced of the possibility of finding an alternative sea route for the expansion of this wealth. Although the result of the voyage is still a matter of controversy among historians, it is believed that Cabot reached the mainland of North America in neighborhoods of Nova Scotia. But this expedition of 1498 was a failure with regards to locating a North Atlantic route to the Far East. The voyages of John Cabot were followed in the early decades of the 16th century by a number of other voyages from Bristol. Among these were those of William Hawkins in 1530. William Hawkins made several voyages to Brazil. He called at the Guinea coast on his way, where he traded in ivory and logwood. Also, between 1553 and 1555, he got to Windham and Guinea coast, which at the time were in Portuguese hands. These English voyages brought back pepper, ivory, and gold dust in spite of the vehement protest from the Portuguese. But of these voyages, that of John Hawkins, the son of William Hawkins, were of decisive importance in the relations of England and Spain in the Caribbean. John Hawkins made voyages in 1562, 1564 to 65, and 1567 to 1568. He was a shared adventurer with remarkable organizing ability. He was aware that the Spanish colonists in the West India Islands needed slaves to work on their plantations. On his first voyage, John Hawkins got slaves from Sierra Leone on the West African coast. He took about 400 Negroes, which he sold to the Spanish colonists in Hispaniola. Philip II of Spain forbade his subjects to trade with Hawkins, but Hawkins was defiant. He successfully made his second voyage, where again he sold slaves to Spanish colonists in the New World. Hawkins' last voyage, undertaken in 1567 to 68, encountered considerable difficulty with Spaniards. He was drawn into a war with the Spaniards and only managed to avoid being killed. In 1577, Francis Drake continued English voyage of discovery. Drake voyages had two objectives. First was to weaken Spain by seizing their trail. Second, it was believed that a southern continent existed, stretching westwards from the southern shores of the Strait of Magellan. Drake's objectives was to explore this supposed landmass and find out the possibilities of colonizing and trading with it. It was this assignment that Drake sought to carry out when, between 1577 and 1580, he succeeded in making a voyage round the world. This was to strike a decisive blow to the Spanish and Portuguese claim to exclusive right in discovery and empire. Cabot himself died during one of the voyages, yet the voyages of exploration never stopped. The cod fishes of the Newfoundland banks, which Cabot found, were later to yield economic returns to European countries, which exploited them. Indeed, a flourishing trade grew up between Europe and the Newfoundland. Aside from the notable voyages of John Hawkins and Francis Drake, the British sought to find an alternative route to the east, either by a northwest or northeast passage. In 1527, Robert Thorn, a Bristol merchant, persuaded King Henry VI to send out an expedition to discover this passage. Thorn's effort yielded little positive result, but in 1553, a number of merchant adventurers decided to send out an expedition to find a northeast route. An expedition of 3 ships only left Deptford in May 1553. One of the advocates of water passage was Sir Humphrey Gilbert, who in a discourse argued that America was a great island and that since Magellan has found a strait in the south, a similar one must surely exist in the north. This idea led to a renewed effort by England and other rising maritime nations of Holland and France to discover the water passage. England reasoned that if she was able to discover the route, it would be possible for her to establish monopoly over it by right of first discovery. It was Martin Frobisher. He made 3 voyages to the North Atlantic in 1576, 1577, and 1578. On the first voyage, Martin reached the southern tip of Baffin Island, after which he returned to England with some quantity of gold. On the second voyage, in 1977, he was still looking for the North Atlantic Strait that would lead to the Far East. He could not locate it before he returned home with 200 tons of ore. The last voyage was undertaken in 1578. When all the attempts at finding a northeast passage had failed, the English now turned their interest in the northwest passage. John Davis, an experienced navigator, continued to search for a northwest passage. He made 3 voyages in 1585, 1586, and 1587 to find the northwest passage. But like Frobisher, the hope of Davis locating a northwest strait remained unfulfilled. In 1523, France joined in the search for a water passage to the Far East through the North Atlantic. In that year, an Italian, Giovanni di Verrazzano, in the service of King Francis I of the France, made a voyage with the purpose of reaching China. He achieved little success because he did not go beyond the east coast of Newfoundland. However, French made Jacques Cartier in his voyages made important discoveries. He made 3 voyages in 1534, 1535, and 1541, seeking to locate a water passage to the Far East. Although Cartier did not locate the passage, his discovery and exploitation of St. Lawrence estuary was important, in which it aided further discovery by French explorer in the early 17th century. The Dutch also made several notable attempts to get a northeast sea route to China. Voyages were sent out in 1594, 1595, and 1596. Spitsbergen and other Arctic islands were found, but little progress eastward was made. Study section summary. In this study section, you have learnt that 1. All the European nations discussed in this chapter were propelled by similar reasons to venture overseas. 2. The major reasons were to boost their political power, enhance their national pride, and improve their economic fortunes. 3. In the process of achieving the above objectives, a number of their explorers became prominent actors in the quest for expansion of Europe. John Cabot, William and John Aikins, Francis Drake, Giovanni di Verrazzano, Jacques Cartier, etc. were major explorers that were dominant during this era. 4. They all sought alternative routes to the east and succeeded in discovering newfound lands that Europeans had hitherto not been to. 5. In their ventures, they expanded European knowledge of areas that were unknown to them and also established European presence in these areas. End of study section 8. Thank you for listening.